Thanks for joining us this week on Email Geeks at Home Drinking Coffee. Join your hosts Chris Marriott and Paul Schreiner each week as they talk email marketing, life, purpose, faith, but mainly email marketing. If you're looking for some normalcy in these crazy times, you've come to the right place.
Welcome back to the Email Geeks at Home Drinking Coffee. Today, more than ever, I feel at home as opposed to at work. I think just the more time we spend doing this at home, the more it feels like that's where we are. So anyway, I'm Paul Schreiner. Glad to be here. My co-host is
Chris Marriott. Also delighted to be here. Good morning, everybody, and happy new week. Oh, and as always, our producer, David, here is joining us in the what we call pre-show. Oh, night. I noticed your background just got a much better lip, Paul. Well done.
Yeah, I know. My computer.
Now, Paul, before we started recording, you were asking some questions that I said I wanted to answer, sort of on air live.
Yeah. Well, I noticed that you're not wearing a headset. That was the thing. And I said, it seems that something's different.
Yes, it is. We've been spending, the show has been so successful that we've had, David's been giving me more money to invest in my own home studio.
Which makes sense.
Upgrades. And so we finally figured out how to go headphone free. I've got a very large, I've got a very large speaker behind me that in fact also has flashing lights. So it's fun to look at. And, maybe next week I'll raise it up so people can see it. But yes, I'm headphone free and loving it. I'm loving the freedom, loving it. Paul, you've seen Frozen, or are you just taking it all in? Looks like he's frozen. Well, while he's frozen, David, I have a couple, as usual, I have a couple of beefs with you. So we can start there. And beef number one, we've got a very exciting guest for everybody today. Matthew Vernut will be on the show, and we're thrilled. The only issue there is that, once David had booked him to be our guest, because that's one of David's jobs, is to book our guests. I learned that he had just appeared last week on another podcast from our good friend Chris Donald at Inbox Army. So we're getting him, after he's already told all the good stories, all the good anecdotes. It's sort of like, if Jay Leno had Vince Vaughn on, and then the next night Letterman's producer booked Vince Vaughn as well. I don't think David Letterman would have been happy. What steps have you put in place to prevent some blunders like this from happening again in the future, where you're not booking someone who's just been on a competitor's podcast?
That's a great question, Chris, and I'm happy to answer. I've actually recently decided to subscribe to every other marketing podcast available online, every single other one. And so I'm just constantly listening, learning, hearing all these different podcasts, hearing all these new episodes, and keeping track of who's the guest, who's not the guest. And there should be no redundancy going forward.
Good.
I, for one, am grateful, David. The amount of time and effort you put into this show is really spectacular.
Well, it's an inspiration to us all, but nevertheless, I feel that we need to point out when he does something that we don't approve of. Now that's just all right.
I'm sorry. I'm getting interrupted a ton today, Chris.
You know what?
I'm sorry about that.
You know what, David? We can't keep up with him. I mean, we can't keep up with him. I was about to get on David about another embarrassing situation he put me in this week. But I'm not even sure it's worth after that brilliant bit that
What?
Oh, here we go again.
What? Well, I don't understand.
I hope those are pork rinds. No, they aren't.
I'm sorry, Chris. The problem is when you live with a bunch of people, as I do, you just get interrupted. That's the challenge. But I'm sure I talked to him ahead of time. I said, "Hey, I'm on the air. Please." Oh, goodness.
Oh, goodness is right.
A watermelon. I'm sorry, Chris. Seriously, stop. All done.
Can we go on with the show,
Chris, we forgot the knife. I mean, you can't have a watermelon without a knife, Chris.
No, of course not. Of course
I mean,
not.
here's the deal. Like, I enjoy a good slice of watermelon while talking with Matt Fernell. That's always how it's been. So again, I'm sorry. I should have done this ahead of time, a little pre-work. My bad.
All right. Is it safe to go on with the show?
I think so. Yes.
All right. Well, I'm going to jump a bit in the interest of time.
Oh my goodness. A blowtorch.
Oh my gosh.
I'm sorry, Chris. Out. No more.
I almost wish I had my headphones on.
I know you're wondering, how long can this go on, Chris? The answer is literally as long as video allows it to. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I do know what I mean. And now I know why you were so busy this morning.
Oh, goodness. What is this? Oh, that's nice. Flowers. Because yesterday was Mother's Day.
You realize that most good bits come in threes. I think that was number 7,
Chris,
number 8.
again,
David, are you keeping?
You don't even understand how inexpensive data storage is for video now. It's amazing. You just keep going on and on and on.
All right. Can I proceed to my next?
I don't know. No, go ahead.
Oh, now we're looping. Now we're looping. Stop it. Now we're looping. You already got a cup of coffee.
That's a second cup. If you'll notice, it's a different cup, Chris.
Okay. All right. Can I continue with this program?
We'll see.
All right. Anyway, David, we'll discuss my other issue with you offline later. But it involves the embarrassing piece of marketing material you gave me with a name that with the incorrect name on it, apparently. But I wanted to say that this show is inspiring many people on many levels. We hope to be inspiring people. There's hope that there are people that want to help them. On the serious side, that's been our goal from the start, to give people a sense of being together in this, and as I said, inspiring them. Well, last week's show, I watched it with my wife, and she was inspired, Paul, deeply inspired, in fact, by the Bye Bye Birdie hat that you had put together. So over the course of the week, she's pulled together some additional items that she's hoping to merchandise. She's calling it the Bye Bye Birdie line of goods, and she's hoping that we can put it alongside the mugs that we were talking about on our as merch. So what she's developed so far, just since last week, is the Bye Bye Birdie key ring.
Is that, you got to hold that up outside the glare is really hard. Please tell me that's a picture of high school Chris.
Yes, there's high school Chris. The Bye Bye Birdie.
Oh my goodness.
Key ring.
Okay.
She also has developed the Bye Bye Birdie
commemorative coaster.
Thank you. The Bye Bye Birdie.
And look at that hair.
Look at that hair. Boy, those were the days. And lastly, and again, she only had a week to turn this project around. But
especially with production lines, with COVID-19, and all that stuff.
But this may be, I think, the favorite item coming out. The Bye Bye Birdie throw pillow.
Oh my goodness. What's spectacular about that, Chris, is that's going to be on your couch. And when this whole thing's done, people will come over and they'll be like, why do you have a picture of yourself on the couch from high school?
There we have it. So now we have a hat. Our merchandise line is expanding. The Bye Bye Birdie merchandise line.
I love this.
Now. We got pillows. There was a luggage tag, but we couldn't put our finger on it. So, but we've got coasters. We've got luggage tags. We've got, again, the keychain. I know that didn't, but now you know what's on that. I know the glare was.
Yeah.
But, so that's what we've been doing here in Chicago this week. We haven't been going out, not just because the lock home, but because spring in Chicago involves a lot of days that look great from the inside.
Yeah.
And then you go outside and it's 35 degrees, and which it is again today, 35 degrees. So anyway, that's my week. Paul, what about you?
It's been a week. My back went out midweek, and so there was a day where I just wasn't moving. And that happens periodically to me. This weekend, we leveled out the lawn. We had some filter for the veggie garden that was brought in, and we leveled it out, put the grass seed down. So hoping to grow some grass in the place where mud once was.
Nice.
Yeah. The other thing that's been interesting to me is I've been watching because we're marketers, I've been watching our metrics in terms of how we're doing as a show. One of the things that's interesting is we put the same amount of time in. This week, we've added a ton of subscribers on YouTube, like 30, which we're still talking about small numbers compared to the big guns,
Right.
But at the same time, it's really interesting to me what's driving that, because there are YouTube puts in place these sort of gates. When you hit this point, you get certain things, and at this point you get certain things. So we are at time of filming, we are 11 subscribers away from having a vanity URL.
Oh.
I know, and honestly, that's how YouTube really sets you apart, right? Like vanity URL, front of the line for you, right?
Exactly.
I mean, everything comes in at that point.
Well, and that's why we got in this business to begin with,
right?
Getting things like vanity URLs. That was it wasn't all altruistic. We wanted that vanity URL, and so folks, if you're watching this and you haven't followed
us, you should.
Right, please go to Email Geeks Drinking Coffee, which would be a URL if 11 of you actually subscribe.
11 more, Chris. Don't put them down. If we lose anyone, we're screwed.
No. Yeah, we want to be the Hotel California of subscribers. Once you subscribe, you can't get out. And but you know what? Over time, you'll get inside deals on Bye Bye Birdie.
Yes,
items.
Right. Now, I will say this, Chris, we are winding down. We've got one more show after this, and we've got a bonus episode. I don't want to give
special event.
Yeah. But this has been such a fun run. So
yeah, it has.
Anyway, we'll kind of keep that discussion going as to what's coming next. But certainly that 8-episode first season, man, this is rapidly gotten past us.
Yes, and I just want to say that keep an eye out for our announcements for next week's show, because we have, not to put down any of our previous guests who've been awesome, but we have a very surprise, interesting guest on episode 8 next week. You do not want to miss episode 8.
Excellent.
All right.
With that, we'll welcome our guest.
We'll say goodbye to producer David.
Yes, thanks, David, as always. Thanks for all the hard work. And
please continue your efforts to track down the origins of the Cool Kids of Email marketing myth, because we don't want to leave that go. We're gonna play that bit, beat that bit into the ground. So
into the ground. Mark my words, we will kill it.
We will. People will be so sick of, like they got sick very quickly of the Pauls coming in. Earlier in this
again, Chris, I'm sorry about that. You know what I mean?
Yeah, clones. Okay. All right, let's go to the show.
All right, thanks. Welcome back to the Email Geeks at Home Drinking Podcast. We have our special guest, Matt Vernout, with us today. A friend of mine who's been in the industry for a long, long time. Well, we've been in the industry together for a long, long time, and I always look forward to spending time with him. And even pre-show stuff, it's been fun to catch up. So I'm looking forward to it. Matt, welcome to the show.
Yeah, thanks for inviting me. I'm looking forward to it.
Me too. Chris, do you want to ask him about coffee? Because I'm a control freak today, apparently. Right. Second cup, and all of a sudden, boom.
We always start, Matthew, with what we're drinking. I'll go first, and then I'll hand it over to you. I, as usual, as people have come to expect, but there's a twist this week. I'm drinking Santo Domingo from the Dominican Republic, which, again, you all who've been paying attention should remember. Paul had a glorious vacation scheduled, and with his wife, and that was canceled. And He still has not been in Dominican Republic, but you can drink coffee from. But so here's what I'm drinking. But notice
It's like you're
in a
there.
can.
In a
It's
can.
When was the last time? Yeah, you saw coffee in a can. But you know what? These things are great because once the coffee's gone, you can collect things in them. So for you home who are collectors, get a can of coffee, finish the coffee, and you've got a great thing to hoard your whatever they might be. So
There's
Right,
money in it, bury it in the yard.
yeah, and
Well,
bury
when
it in
our
the-
alien overlords come, I mean, we wanna be able to have cans, you know.
and give them a second life. So anyway, Matt, what are you drinking today?
So I'm going old school. I went with the French press, which I'm
There
going
you
to actually
go.
press live on the show.
And he's even showing the process, Chris.
Well, I'm
I,
not going to show the whole process because I have to have it on the table, but I'm
Yeah.
going to at least press it. And it's just it's a 100% Arabica bean,
Arabica, sure.
Trader Joe dark roast blend. It's a little, it's a great blend. I enjoy drinking it. I don't get Trader Joe's often because they're not here in Canada, but
Right.
so
like smuggle it across the border.
Well,
Like
when we lived in
you're
Washington,
legally allowed
there-
to bring it back. I don't actually have to smuggle it.
in the tailpipe of the I'm sure David's got lots of ways to smuggle things across that
I may have to ask Paul to mail me some though, because with the border
Yeah,
being
it-
closed, I can't
Oh,
get
right.
across to refill my coffee reserves.
Anybody going to Canada, just remember this because we try to educate as well as entertain. If you plan to go to Canada, you're going to be quarantined for 2 weeks before you can cross that border, quarantine for 2 weeks. So, if there's a
Well-
baseball season this year, I can promise you the Blue Jays will not be playing in Canada. They'll have to play in the U.S. because couldn't play any games if you had to quarantine a baseball team.
Yeah, the whole thing's miserable.
Yeah.
If we get enough coffee in me, Matt, I'll tell the story of when my car got searched over ketchup potato chips on the U.S. border.
There you go. That's a story I think I need to hear at some point.
Yeah.
I'll
Well,
put
anyway,
that-
let's jump into it. It was really fun and honestly, our pre-show. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm supposed to talk about what I'm drinking, Chris.
No. Well, yes, I'd like you to, but I'll
Sure. Stumptown. The good beans, and then espresso. What I want to say is I bought this bag on Friday.
Wow.
My kids and wife and I have been drinking a lot of coffee lately, stuck at home. Like the fact that we've gone through an entire bag in a weekend, we need to buy the cheap beans again.
Hold on. How old are your kids again? You let them drink coffee?
Well, my oldest is 17. He'll be 18 here in June.
you'll
And
stunt his
then
throat.
16, and then 14, 11, and 8, almost 9. So, and the youngest,
Anything goes at the Shriner house. I mean,
well,
you
the
ought to know
youngest
that
is
by now.
Ethiopian, and there's an expectation in Ethiopia that children drink coffee, and I don't want to let that expectation slip.
All right, he's got us there. He's got
I
us.
started drinking coffee around like 14.
Yeah. I don't have a problem with the kids drinking coffee.
And I've actually,
if
I
they're-
think I've had this Bodum since I was like 16. So
if the
like,
kids are
it's
getting
old
hopped
school.
up, well, and I kid, but at the same time, our daughter is Ethiopian. When we adopted her from Ethiopia, the judge said, you're now Ethiopian as much as she is now American. And I took it seriously, right? And so the idea of letting her have coffee when some of the other kids were too young, yeah, I'm a terrible parent, but I am a fantastic Ethiopian.
Oh, that's good to hear. I wanted before we get into the meat of the show, I just have a question. Matt, we learned, and trust me, we've already berated David, producer David, about this, and it better never happen again. But we learned that you were just a week ago. You were on another podcast with Chris Donald, and so what I want to know is, and again, it's not your fault that you were booked back to back. David and I had a little chat about that, but I want to know who's got a better green room. And for
Oh,
kids,
yes. Yeah.
for those at home, the green room is where you stay while you're off stage before you come on and join the host. So who's got a better green room? Do we have one? Is our green room?
Well, it's a bit of a unique situation considering my green room is my home office. It's pretty much the same for both sessions. And in fact, all sessions, and I have a couple other podcasts coming out soon that I've been guesting on. So, needless to say, it's been a busy recording month.
It's tough being popular. Wanted, I get it.
Well, it's too bad. David, you and I'll have a chat about this. If you were aware that his green room was his home office, I would have expected a large basket of jelly beans and other treats to show up this week. Drop the ball. We'll be talking about that off air.
Yeah, for sure.
Anyway, Paul,
I'll send you my address. I expect a delivery showing up later. Then you can make up for it.
I'm pretty sure we have the address. And then it says Canada, and they'll just know. They'll just know.
And maybe we'll throw in a special Bye Bye Birdie pillow.
Yeah. So Matt, the original. We're gonna go all over the place this morning. I'm assuming. I wanted to bring you on. The first topic was, our show. We definitely do talk about email stuff, things that help email marketers out, how to improve their careers, all of those things. And in the process of that, I think we have a pretty fantastic time. I wanted to bring you on because you're Mr. Email, but also because you are pretty prominent within the email EEC, Email Evolution.
Email Experience.
Thank you, Email Experience Council. I feel horrible about not remembering that because I'm.
Email Evolution is the event. Email Experience is the organization.
But I do. I want to set the table for you and say, why should an email marketer, when money's tight, people are losing jobs, when all of that is taking place, why should someone spend the money? Sometimes out of their work budget, but sometimes it's out of their personal budget. Why should they join the EEC?
Well, if you think about it,
or any community group.
Well, sure, yeah. We can start sort of more general. Any community. I think first off, professionally, especially in the email marketing industry, you tend to be either on a really small team within your organization, especially as a marketer or developer or programmer, whatever you happen to be within the realm of email. So you kind of feel isolated at work. And I get this conversation all the time. You feel a bit isolated at work. You're the only one doing your job, or it's a very small team. You don't have a lot of people internally to reach out for help, like other departments might have 10 or 15 people you can reach out to and say, I'm stuck on a programming issue, help me. Email programming is a bit more unique and specialized, if you will, than just standard web development. So being part of a community, first off, gives you access to a significantly larger population of people to ask questions to. And there's free communities. So on LinkedIn, there are several email-related communities. There's an Email Geeks on LinkedIn. There's the Email Marketing Gurus. There's, oh God, I couldn't even list them all. There's a whole bunch.
Yep.
And then in the Email Geeks Slack, unrelated to the LinkedIn group, similar name, but completely different sort of organizations. That's a huge resource sort of globally. People are online 24/7 almost, it feels like, asking questions, answering questions. So those are sort of free communities, easy to join, low barrier to entry. But then you start to look at other communities where you get a bit more professional, maybe education. So someone like the EEC, they're running educational webinars, they're running information sessions, they're publishing papers, resource guides, that type of information that you may not get from a free community that's just people collaborating and getting to know each other, having conversations. So you get a bit more, you step up a tier in regards to what you get. And like all communities, I find you get what you give. The more you supply into the community, typically the more you get back. Right? For me, it's been very professionally gratifying because I find I can answer lots of questions around things like deliverability and privacy and general best practices for marketing and data collection and data management, et cetera. But when it comes to programming and email, I'm not a developer.
Not you.
If I have questions or I get stuck with something, I'm trying to help a client, I can reach into the community and say, why doesn't this make sense?
I do the same thing. I totally do the same thing. And that way, my customers think I'm smart.
Yeah, and I find by giving back to the community as much as you can, people are eager to answer your questions when they can help you.
Right.
Yep.
Right. And I learn stuff all the time. I've been doing this a long time, 20 years this year. Like I've been doing this a long time. So, I feel like I've given back a lot But in the end, like I still learn stuff all the time. I still get different points of opinion. By no means do I think I know everything, but at least I can have an intelligent discussion and be like, oh, I just learned something about something that I thought I knew a lot about.
Right. So I 100% agree with you on plugging into any community, especially when you're talking about a small group. And that, for people who are not part of the email marketing community watching this, which, we have a huge fan base, Matt.
Right. Extends far beyond email marketing.
There's communities that exist everywhere. And I believe you even are part of those. Is that correct, Matt?
I'm part of a whole bunch of sort of different organizations and communities and such. So yeah,
I believe you in sharing in this discussion, the pre-call call. How many? You counted the number of communities you're part of?
Oh God, no, and I'm sure it wasn't even close. Like just on Slack, let me take a quick count here.
This is where we need music.
Is it?
Call it 11 Slack communities, not including the work-related ones that are directly like office stuff. Plus, I sit on the board for four organizations right now.
Chris, we have the right guest. He's a junkie.
Right. I was going to say, I feel like a piker. Paul, you and I are nobodies.
We're ham and eggers, Chris.
We are ham and eggers. We don't sit on the boards of anything. Except our own show, our own program.
The email geeks at home drinking coffee. I'm on that board.
Right. I'm on that board too, but that's it.
Well, Chris, you run your own company, so I'm sure you're on that board.
Well, that's true. So I'm all right. I'm on two boards.
I think you're on our board too, aren't you, Chris?
You're right. I'm on your advisory board. That's three.
But I don't believe I'm on your advisory board.
Oh.
You know what? I'm going to set one up and put you right in charge of that. And so.
Okay.
So, Chris, you've been on other boards. I know you were on a board of a company that was sold in the last year as well. So
that's right. So
EDS.
Successful liquidation event. So, and this is why Matthew was so valuable to the community. Paul, you and I were going to be in the dumps the rest of the day, and he lifted us up. Now I feel better.
Happy to
Before I get too distracted, one more pitch. Tell us about EEC. Tell us about your role there. Why should someone be part of the EEC?
Well, beyond the sort of professional connections, the professional education opportunities, the events that are happening, it's a pretty tight-knit community. It's a small community. It's a lot of sort of senior thought leaders sharing information. And, I've been a member for a long time. And as of July 1st, I think it is, I'm stepping up to be the chair.
What?
So I'm currently the co-chair.
In person to know.
I know.
I'm stepping up to be the chair. There's also lots of opportunities. So if you're looking to give back to the community, we have several different organizational groups to help with events and education, to help with best practice documentation development, to help with event planning. Our big annual event, although this year in person was canceled, is going virtual. So we're going to do a virtual event. And, I think it's, for a lot of people, it's a good thing to also be, on your resume. Like, I was on this committee, I was a chair, a co-chair, I was on the member advisory council, which is basically our board.
I think I'm on something. I help pick winners of things.
I think you're on the awards committee. See, so we do awards every year.
I'm very good at telling people they're amazing.
Yeah, so there you go. So every year we do awards. This year, for example, Sims Jenkins from Brightwave.
They were just
a giant in the industry.
He just won Thought Leader of the Year for this year.
The full list was just announced today, wasn't it? So why don't you go through, Sims, I know, was public a couple of weeks ago, but it looked like the other awards, the Stefan Pollard Award, was just announced, or
I think it's Stephen Pollard.
Stephen Pollard, yeah. Pollard?
No, in Illinois, we pronounce it Stefan.
I think it's pronounced Illinois.
Okay.
Stephen Pollard, fine. Stephen Pollard.
Yeah, I'm trying to think who else. I actually don't have the list in front of me of winners. I have to go dig it out.
That's okay. That's okay.
We need to put you on the spot.
Here's what I will say. this particular podcast more or less grew out of these kind of conferences. There are so many. I've always called them the email glitterati, which I warmly extend that moniker to you, Matt, to you, Chris. These are the people that, you call them thought leaders, but these are the people that when you have questions, these are the people you go to, right? Now, I realize no one ever comes to me with questions. They always, you guys' phones are running off the hook. I'm one of the cool kids by association, which I'm okay with.
I don't know. I ask you questions from time to time, so just
that is true. That's true. But here's what I was going to say.
Well, you often get asked, "How do I get in touch with Matt or Chris?" And so you are getting asked.
Yeah, that's true. That is true. That's probably the number one question that comes in. Do you have Chris Marriott's phone number? No, what I was going to say is this podcast, this show, out of that type of event where Chris and I are just sitting around, and actually it's the networking events, and those are my favorite.
Yeah.
Because basically, and those will come back once our world comes back together. But you're standing around someone, God bless whoever that person is paying for drinks, right?
Yes.
And there's this nervous discomfort with walking up to somebody you don't know, introducing yourself, and am I supposed to pitch something? Am I supposed to talk about my kids? I don't know. But you go up to a group of people and you're like, hey, you got your drink, handshaking the first time. And, oh, tell me a little bit about you. Where do you come from, right? And it's speed dating. Do you get to know them? But in this process, you get to know people and enjoy people. And also in this process, we've had some incredible conversations. I know the three of us have stood around a table and just had a great time. But specifically, Chris and I, we'll just sort of vamp for hours, and people will come in and leave and come in and leave. And people have said, you guys should do a show. But it really did grow out of this type of community.
It did.
And that's what's great about any community, right? Is it gives you either a place to test something, to make a connection, to, maybe find a new job, find a sales connection, find a new vendor.
Yep.
Offer your services as a vendor. So, sometimes you never know what you're going to get until you show up. And then all of these things happen. Like I went to an event last year and made a connection there. Took some people out for dinner, and then, it didn't lead to anything right away, but 8 months later, it turned into a fairly significant size sale for the business. And I'm not even the sales guy. I was just there as a speaker.
Yeah.
Got to know some people, took them out for dinner, talked about what we did, at the company, how we help businesses.
I may have come to that event, Matt. I think $250 okay paid for some high-end food.
No, that was, were you in Vegas last year?
Yes.
So it was there, and dinner was just me and a couple people.
It was an exclusive dinner, Paul.
It was.
Yeah,
it
we
was
didn't get the invite to that one.
No, of course
no,
not.
But
it wasn't intentionally an exclusive dinner. It just happened to be
I'm sure,
people standing around having a conversation and said, do you want to go grab dinner? So we went and grabbed dinner.
I'm sure if Paul and I had been there, we would have been invited, right, Paul? I mean,
I'm sure. No, but I do want to get to that here for a second. The thing is, you went to the event. You just hung out with your friends. You said, hey, can I take you all out to dinner with no expectation? I'm not trying to sell you anything. Yeah. There's nothing going on here. Yeah. In the process, they say, tell me about what you do. But at the end of the day, it's really just about being together and getting to know this community better.
Well, and I've never been in sales. That's not my role for the organization. My role is to go out and make connections, to meet people, to introduce them to the idea of the company, and then even pass that on as a internal referral, if you will. And sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. This case, it worked really well, and it was, like I said, took someone out for dinner, had a great time, and then bam.
And at the same time, if nothing had come of it, who cares?
But not everybody's Paul Schreiner or Matt with a big, very, very large expense account. There's a lot of people, ham and eggers, who don't have that, and so who really are dependent upon the communities itself to get out there. And Matt, you've you've slammed me for violating community norms in the past.
Slammed hard.
I'm not sure fairly or unfairly. We don't need to relitigate what happened. You know what I'm talking about. But
we're still friends, so
we're still friends. Exactly. But you know, what are good do's and don'ts for somebody joining a community member? What is it? What makes you a good citizen of a community? I mean, you've gone over some of that, I know, like helping people, but what's the right way to be, you know, and interact with the community, and what's the wrong way to interact with the community?
So there's a few things, and I think, you know, like you said, we've certainly had conversations about behavior and stuff in communities. And I think part of it is understanding what the rules of the communities are, right? So most communities have some type of rules of engagement, rules of behavior. It could be, you know, no selling in the community unless someone asks specifically about a product. Then you can respond and say, you know, I have a product, or I know of a product, those types of things. So understanding the rules, the basic rules of the community. I think also, if you're going to join a community, specifically observe the community for a while. You know, participate, but don't go in guns blazing, pitching your product, your sales, because nobody will know who you are potentially, right?
Or care who you are.
Or yeah, exactly. You know, and I think sometimes a lot of people come in very aggressively, and it turns people off.
Yep.
People are like, I'm not here to be sold to. I'm here to learn something. If I happen to find something that I want to buy along the way, great. And I think some of that is even cultural differences. You know, you know, having worked in the North American marketplace, the U.S. sales process is significantly different than the Canadian sales process, as an example.
Okay, good.
So it's just sort of the personalities of, you know, the aggressive nature of salespeople and things like that. Right. They're a little different. So I think understanding the community, what the community's purpose is, you know, some communities have rules around, you know, you can only sell stuff, you can only pitch to the community on Fridays,
right,
as an example. Or if you're going to pitch, you have to put it in the specific Slack channel. You know, there's a vendor channel or a promos channel or something like that. Like one of the communities I'm in has a channel called Shameless Plug. You can basically put anything you want in there, and any day of the week, but that's where it lives. If it lives anywhere else, or if you try to put it anywhere else, the community will police you and say, move this. Or if you don't, an admin will come along and delete it. So, you know, those are the things I would say, you know. So first off, you know, add value.
Yep.
Understand the rules. Get to know people first.
Yep.
And then respond sort of appropriately. Right.
Yeah.
It's pretty basic. You know, I think a lot of people get upset even nowadays with like cold emails, right? So these are just straight up sales emails because they're sort of untargeted. They're potentially, you know, oh, if you're the wrong person, can you forward this to them? Like, sorry, you know, I'm busy. I don't have time to forward this to somebody else, right? I don't even know who the right person is. And if you're trying to sell to me, maybe you need to do that research. So that's kind of that same process, right? Of get to know the community, get to know the players, become a valuable asset, and then people will respond to your messaging. And even, you know, I'm a big fan of the soft sell.
Me too.
In regards to, I have a question. Oh, well, I wrote an article about that. Look, we have a solution that solves that. We have those types of things. It's not the in-your-face sale. And again, maybe some of that's cultural. But I think, you know, for me, providing that type of value of, I have a solution that can help, but I'm not a sales guy, so I'm not going to be buy my stuff.
We actually talked about that last week. The sales process has changed, right? It's no longer the high pressure, I got to close the deal, I need the Glengarry leads, right? It's now, you know, I'm providing solutions. Do you have this need? Let me dig in and understand what your need is, and then I'll help you with it, right? Like it's a different world. Now, I want to switch gears for a second, Matt. I've noticed process keeps oscillating back and forth depending on whether or not you're talking about stateside versus Canada.
Yeah.
I also noticed that you've said oot and out. Again, is this something?
I've never said oot.
You did say oot.
No. I'm going to play back the video later. I never said oot.
You corrected yourself, which is what I'm wondering. Is there I'm assuming Royal Canadian Mountie Police, Mounties, right? Is there this rule that says we say things a certain way here, but external to Canada, this is how we say things?
You know, it's
It's okay to slip, Matt. Listen,
No,
we all make mistakes.
I think so. When I write things, for example, for my own website, I use sort of Canadian British English, right? So color with a U, those types of things. When I write things for the company blog that is going to be predominantly focused towards an American audience, I write using the American spelling.
So you translate in your head from
So color
Canadian
without
to
the U.
American.
And sometimes I don't get caught, and our copywriters help me, and they, our copy editors, when they read my stuff, they're like, nope, this is going on the company blog, so it's going to use the American spelling. I think flipping back and forth between process and process, that sometimes happens depending who I'm talking to. Typically, I use process.
Oh, so when you're talking to me, who's down in the South, it's process. But when you're talking to Chris, who's closer to Canada, being in Illinois, it's process. Chris, what?
So this is one of those things. So, I being Canadian, a lot of my American friends always say, well, you say a boot. And I'm like, I don't say a boot. I say about.
I have not heard you say a boot.
I think that's just you're getting lost in translation. I don't say that.
No, I haven't heard you say a boot.
But the same thing is, people always say, well, process. I'm like, well, spell it for me. Spell process for me.
Paul.
P-R-O-C-E-S-S.
Right. So where's the A? Where's the pra? Spell process. Process is how it's spelled and how it should be pronounced.
That's right. Chris, or Matt, I'm with you. Listen, I'm on your team. It's Chris. Chris is the one who
All I want to say is this is what makes this show so exciting. We've got such an international flair. We've got Canadians. We had someone from England a couple of weeks ago. Where are they going to come from next? And we'll have more fascinating discussions about how to pronounce individual words. Again, the education and value of this show just keeps going up and up and up. And I, for one, am very proud of that.
I'm going to switch gears. And I don't know if
good because
there's nowhere to go.
You beat that to death.
Matt, earlier you kind of shared that you were a little bit of a Swiss Army knife, like you lots of things to do. Data, you do deliverability, data security, you do sort of compliance stuff. We've been doing a ton. I've been getting more and more requests in around CCPA. California Consumer Privacy Act. Do you see that continuing?
Like laws like that?
No. Do you see more and more requests coming in? Do you think?
Oh yeah, I think so. CCPA came into force in January,
right?
But it's actually not being enforced until June,
right?
June 1st, right? So as we get closer to June 1st, I think you'll see more people exercising their rights because more websites have now become into compliance. They're getting more information. We're seeing a trend across the different states in the U.S. that more laws are coming that are similar.
Right.
The whole cookie cutter law effect that we see.
Do you think so? Yeah, I totally agree, and I agree. So California kind of led the way, the charge, and said this is what we're going to do. And so everyone kind of said, well, we have to support that because California is a huge state, right? And it's that thing where, like, if your largest state in the country does something and requires that anyone that does business with those people in that state, that's now the law of the land, right? And so now when Colorado has its own privacy law, and Washington State and Texas and all these other states that are also sort of a little more progressive in their thinking around data security, is there a point where we're going to get federal legislation?
Well, federal legislation in the U.S. has been attempted a few times and has never sort of made it past the first hurdle, if you will.
Okay.
So there are various stages that it's been attempted. Is it ongoing? Sure. Is it really going to work in the U.S.? So if you've been around long enough, and Chris, I know you certainly have. Paul, I'm not quite sure if your memory reaches back this far in the email space. At any rate, early 2000s, there was no email marketing legislation in the U.S., and it was the Wild West, and people sent whatever they felt like. Then California came out with the email law, and as part of sort of how the industry responded was the industry really pushed for a federal legislation that covered everybody.
Right.
It was significantly different actually than the California law. And when the Fed published it, they basically said this preempts all state level laws that deal with this topic. So they basically shut down the California email law at the time, which it's evolved over time. So it deals with things outside of CAN spam, right? But that's really how we got CAN spam, is California was like, well, we're putting out this law.
Yep.
And the industry said, whoa, we can't let just California do that because it's going to make it way too hard.
Right.
So then the Fed came out and did something. But when it comes to privacy legislation, we haven't seen that initiative. And I don't know if it's the same because the current administration just doesn't see it as a priority, or they're kind of looking at it and saying, well, privacy legislation might be anti-business, so they're not pushing for it, or seen as anti-business. I don't actually think it's anti-business personally.
No, I don't either.
Looking back at how the impact of things like Canada's federal privacy legislation, PIPEDA, has impacted business. It basically is a rule around a lot of best practices around data management, data access, data security. We were a little late on the game with the Canadian anti-spam legislation, not coming out until 20. It wasn't passed as law until 2010. It didn't come into force until 2014.
Well, CASL's a cool acronym too.
Yeah, and
I like that acronym. Yeah.
The original acronym was ECPA, Electronic Commerce Protection Act.
That's all Justin Trudeau right there.
No, this was actually a conservative government that passed this legislation. So, anyways, the point being, what we saw, because I studied this for several years after the law came into force, is actually marketers' behavior, consumer engagement, spam complaints, all of these things got better. So more consumer engagement, better list practices, better data management practices, lower spam complaints. All of these things were a result of this legislation. And if you look at the legislation, it's like, make sure people understand they're going to get email from you, give them options to unsubscribe, tell them who you are, right? And basically like follow all the best practices that as a deliverability guy, I've been telling you to follow for 20 years.
Right. Now there's legislation.
Gets better.
Now there's legislation requiring it.
Right.
Okay, but let me take the be the devil's advocate.
I knew this was going to happen.
No,
I love this debate.
Let me be the devil's advocate. CAN spam, as you said, was, and I wasn't in the industry when CAN spam passed. I came in a little bit after, like 2005. But anyway, the CAN spam was, as you said, was wholly embraced by the email industry because it frankly made it legitimate email marketers came out ahead after that, way ahead, because it eliminated the spammers and made email seem like a much more legitimate channel, which it was. But as we've seen in various types of legislation, let's just use smoking as an example, where we're going to ban it in restaurants. Then we're going to ban it in bars. Now we're going to ban it in Times Square. Now we're going to ban it at the beach. Now we're going to ban it in apartment buildings. There's this creeping legislation where it starts being a very useful and eventually becomes something that, it just never stops. There's always another mountain to climb. Do you see, and I'm not criticizing I'm not criticizing CASL, GDPR, the California Protection Act. Do you see a point though where it can go too far? Do you see a tendency where it might go too far? And what is that point? And as an example, I think we could talk about third-party cookies. We could have a whole show about that. Are they good? Are they bad? Are they useful? Are they not useful? The reality is that the privacy legislation that's being passed, we're seeing, that third-party cookies are going away. Whether it's
I agree.
It's the browsers saying we're not going to support them, or because the law. So long-winded way of saying that. Do you see this as a continuing evolution where it can go too far? Or do you think that, there's a point where everybody's going to say, okay, oh, we lost me. Okay, we have protections now, and we can stop.
Right.
Oh, hey Chris, screen sharing now. Got it.
Zoom. AOL mail, Chris? AOL?
All right, hold on. Let me go back and remember the question now that you've got me all distracted with
Uh,
the screen share. So basically,
Can you
are
go
we
too
going,
far?
does legislation go too far? I don't.
There I am.
I think what we're seeing now is like all things. You know, the pendulum swung so far into sort of invasive privacy technologies and things that we're seeing the pendulum swing back. And it just feels like it's going too far at this point. But really, I feel like it's resetting, you know, giving consumers back the access to their own data and to be able to protect their own data. You know, I'm being a bit of an email nerd myself. You know, I track who sells my information, who they sell it to. You know, I use a series of unique email addresses in order to do that. So if
Do
I
you
give
use the aliasing in Gmail where you can say Matt Vernout plus?
well,
don't
considering
know,
I own my
email.
own domain, I basically do that. But yes,
Okay,
I do
got
this
it.
on my own domain. So
Got it.
I use a specific alias for every company that I work with. And when they sell my information or if they get data breached and lose my information, I know exactly who originally had my consent.
Yep.
Right.
Right. So I can go back and point fingers at those organizations and say, what did you do?
You're a fun date.
Well, but part of that is because when you don't use that and when you don't have the ability to track that because you use the
Right.
same email address for everything, you just start to get a lot of spam and you don't understand why.
Right.
Right.
So now I can actually go back and I can reach out to those organizations and say, you said you would never sell my information, yet you did.
What's going on? Right.
What's going on, right? And you know, in Canada, there's recourse for that. We have privacy legislation that protects you from those types of things. GDPR basically protects you from those types of things.
Yep.
CCPA is trying to protect you from those types of things, hence the idea of opting out of
Yeah.
sale of data.
If you're below 5 million.
Sure, but
I mean, there's what I dislike about CCPA is I just think it's there's too many escape clauses, escape hatches, which I feel like makes it not unenforceable, but for, you know, really the companies that are going to have to sort of really comply are the big ones, right? And so now we're penalizing the big brands that do business as opposed to sort of industry change.
yes, yeah, yes and no, but like it is forcing the industry to change typically because of what you're saying. Like, so the big guys need to do the most work. Well, the big guys are the ones also doing the most in regards to data manipulation, data matching, data selling.
Yeah, I don't know.
buying.
Maybe you probably have more insight on that than me. I know that.
Typically they have much bigger budgets, so they have
Yeah.
more access. They have more more services they're using in order to collect that data to get better profiles. So
Yeah.
they have more access to resources to do this.
Yeah.
So it makes sense to start there, and then the big guys typically will push it down, right? So someone, you know, someone like a large ESP, as an example, is going to build tools to manage this internally, and then those tools are going to get given to all of their clients, regardless of the size. So all of a sudden, even a small business now has access to these tools to comply.
Right.
And I think what we saw, even, you know, with the idea of, you know, our nonprofits exempt and things like that, like, great, nonprofits may be exempt. However, as a
Right.
consumer, I'm still going to ask for the same type of
Right.
access and the same type of
How come I can't delete
control.
my? How come I
Right. And
can't see what information you have about me?
Sure. And as a consumer, especially someone in the US, which happens to be very litigious, you know, in regards to personal lawsuits and class actions and things like that, you may actually see in the future an organization that technically doesn't need to comply, but consumers are going to force them to comply because they're going to drag them through legislation. They're going to drag them through the courts. They're going to
Right.
file complaints. They're going to. So you do get this sort of experience of, you know, everyone gets dragged along by the big guys.
Right. Right. I don't know. I mean, it'll the update to CCPA that came out in February has more teeth to it, right? Like,
Sure, yeah.
it went from being like this loose, this feels good, more patchouli oil, to being much more enforceable, right?
Yep.
And
But even if you think about how CCPA was written, right? So it was originally a private bill written and put onto the California vote, right? So they have that system, and it's a little different than any system that I personally have experienced. But the idea of like any private citizen can write a law, and if they get enough people to support it, they can get it on the ballot, and it gets voted on, and then becomes law. So that's how the CCPA started. The private citizen wrote a piece of legislation, got enough people to support it, and the California government went, "Oh my God, what are we going to do? We have to come up with something that preempts this." So they basically rushed and said, "Well, we'll figure the rest out when we get there." And then there was 30 amendments filed for it and all these different things. And then they said, the law comes into force January 1st, but the state attorney general has 6 months to set the boundaries and the guidelines before they're actually going to start enforcing it.
Right.
So what you're seeing is they're filling in the gaps right now. Things like enforcement issues. And
And that's fair. It'll be interesting. I just kind of monitor how many requests come into Audience Point. We do handle data, and we have tried to be a leader in what's safe and what's appropriate and what protects consumers. So we haven't had to make any real changes. But at the same time, I also see all the compliance stuff come across my desk. And, having a single source that we funnel everything through helps with that. I've just seen more and more and more CCPA requests come across. So I was curious, it sounds like you think, this is here to stay.
I think it's here to stay. And I think as we continue to move forward, the rest of the states will start to catch up because, like you said, companies are already forced to comply with California. It's a third of the U.S. population lives in California, something close to that, or a sixth of it or something.
I think it gets into trouble is when you have, this is what freaks me out. Well, here are our requirements for California. Here are our Illinois requirements. Here are requirements. Here's our requirements for Washington, for Texas, for Colorado.
Stefan would never have said Illinois.
I'm sorry, what's that, Chris?
Stefan would never have pronounced it Illinois.
Well, we have something similar here in Canada. So we have a federal privacy legislation, PIPEDA. But Quebec doesn't follow it. They have their own privacy legislation. Alberta doesn't follow it. They have their own privacy legislation. BC doesn't follow it. They have their own privacy legislation. And they're similar enough that they don't have to follow the federal one. And basically the other provinces and territories can choose to follow that, or they could write their own. Most of them have decided they're just going to follow the privacy.
Doesn't that create too many standards?
We only have 10 provinces and 3 territories, so it's a little easier to manage. But at the same time, I was looking into it. We have like 60 different privacy legislations covering things from healthcare to financial to
HIPAA.
Then you have private business, you have government business, so they all have different privacy standards. I can only imagine in the States where you have sort of the 50 basic ones, and then each one you layer on industry level privacy stuff on top. So all of a sudden now you're looking at 1,000 different privacy legislation.
I mean, and I'll move on after this, but there's a point where we move from being, and I know Chris is going to be like, yeah, Paul, there's a point where we move from being sort of like, this is pro-consumer, pro-subscriber, per individual, right? Where we're really making their life better, and it really becomes pro-attorney, pro-lawyer, right? Like, are we really protecting subscribers at that point, or are we just like, now we have to have every single email marketer has to have attorneys on staff to make sure we're compliant with 50 different state legislations, GDPR and CASL.
Well, and I can tell you,
Australia and
Yep.
et cetera, right?
I think you're right, and let me add on that, because for what I see in the RFPs we manage, is that we put requirements in, and as you know, Paul and Matt, we represent marketers when they're looking for new ESP, and we put requirements in that both say, how are you going to ensure that we're GDPR compliant? How are you going to ensure that we're CASL? I mean, so the burden of that in many ways for email marketers is falling on the ESP. And it's not only a question of how are you going to ensure we're compliant, but who's liable if we're not? And that's a real hot potato.
Data protection.
If there's a big lawsuit, is it the ESP? Is it the marketer? And, Paul, I think you hit the nail right on the head that the danger is that laws are passed merely to provide, material for lawsuits that companies will, greenmail. And, I wouldn't be surprised even if the guy who wrote the original case was not a lawyer or was not affiliated with lawyers, because, he was very industrious in doing that. And it's hard to believe it was completely altruistic, but we don't.
Well, yeah, I don't want to spend a ton of history on Castle, but so Castle was originally in 2003. There was an organization put together by the government called the Federal Anti-Spam Task Force, which involved industry, involved legal, involved government.
Right.
And it basically came out with a book that said, this is what an anti-spam legislation should look like, and here's sort of the best practices. It just took them 7 more years to actually pass that legislation, and on the 3rd attempt, I think they did. But we actually, Industry Canada writes our legislations.
Right.
So it's not written by an individual. It's
Right.
written by a federal government body who does research into it, gets feedback. Do they have lawyers on stuff? Sure. Right.
Well,
it also has to go through the justice system. It has to go through like the House and the Senate and stuff. But sure, lawyers are involved in writing it, but I don't think it's exclusively written by lawyers.
Well, one big difference that's important for our viewers at home to understand, again, we're a highly educational show, is that the U.S. legal system is unique on the planet. And by that, I mean everywhere else on the planet, at least the former British Empire, and you can back me up on this, Matt, is if there's a lawsuit, the loser pays the winner's lawyers. And so, except in the U.S. In the U.S., you each pay your own lawyers. So launching these lawsuits, these data breach lawsuits are, whereas in Canada, the lawyers would have to say, gosh, it's a long shot, and if we lose, we're going to have to pay the lawyers of the winning side. In the U.S., it's more like the lottery, and what's evolved over time is companies say, companies getting sued say, is it cheaper to settle and make them go away or to fight it to the end? Because even if we win, I mean, even on a small scale, my old name, as people know, was Marketing Democracy. The use of that was challenged by another company, and I had to make, even on my tiny little, company say, well, and my lawyer said, you're gonna win, but at what cost? Because even if I won, I'm still paying my lawyers, and they were paying their lawyers. And I think, that's a long-winded way of saying, to your point, Paul, the reason in the U.S. I think we have to be careful is we don't want to just create laws that become lawsuit lotteries that don't help the consumer. And so I guess that's going back to, when is it going too far, and are we approaching that point yet? And I guess
I don't know if there's a universal answer for that, and maybe it's just the way that the legal system is set up in the U.S. that it feels more like the lawsuit lottery model. Yeah, I don't think all lawsuits, in the British Commonwealth, if you will, are settled where loser pays. I know that is more common. You don't necessarily have to sue for legal fees, but I don't think it's universally accepted that loser pays every time.
Well, that's not even my concern. I just think, I'm an email marketer. I want to bring it back, right? I'm an email marketer. I care about digital security. I want to do the right thing, right? So I figure out what are the laws that I have to follow. Okay, I've got Castle, California, Texas, Colorado, all the things, right? And pretty soon, it's no longer something that's easy to maintain. While I do believe 100% in the concept of digital security and protecting subscribers, this has gotten so complicated. And I guess that's where I might fall into the category of saying, I think federal legislation, I think GDPR, which covers, lots of different nations, is actually a real good thing, right? It makes it, though sets the standard high, it means we don't have to follow 25 different legislations. We have one. And I think that benefits the email marketer. Because at the end of the day, we want to do the right thing, right? But when it becomes so stinking hard, I didn't even know I was breaking the law, and I'm going to jail. I mean, not really, but you know what I mean.
Counter that, though, right? If you set the bar at what you determine to be the most strict, right? And then you understand there may be minor nuances depending on the state, right? So if you were to say, I'm going to apply GDPR across the board, chances are in most situations, and I won't say 100%, but in most situations, you'll be compliant with CCPA. You'll be compliant with Texas. You'll be compliant with Colorado.
Right.
Right.
There's a minimum.
You'll be compliant with PIPEDA. So the problem is most people don't want to set the bar here. They want to set the bar here. Like even CAN-SPAM is a minimum requirement law for email.
Yep.
Right.
Right. Does your unsubscribe work? And did you put postal address in it? And did you not lie about where it came from?
Right.
CAN-SPAM, right? There's no idea of consent under CAN-SPAM, right? CAN-SPAM literally allows you to send spam as long as your unsubscribe works and you don't lie about who you are.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly.
So it's a minimum requirement law. Whereas Castle basically says you have to start with consent and then work your way down from there.
Right.
I know we're running short on time.
Yes,
because the three of us, I think, can talk forever about.
But this has been an incredibly great conversation. I mean, awesome.
With that said, Matt, one of our traditions is we end the show with a segment, and it's one of those segments I don't ever remember the name of it. Word of the week, lots of words.
No, it's the lightning round.
Lightning round, yes. So anyway, Matt, we finish it with lightning round, and my friend Chris will lead us there.
Yes, I will. And this week, we're actually going to play a very interesting version of it. And what it is I say one word, and you say the first thing that comes to your mind.
Oh, that's different this week. Different rules.
That's the same thing. Usually I say word, you say word. And typically, we'll drill down into one of your answers because we find it odd or interesting or whatnot. But this week, we're playing Canadian style. So all of the one words are going to be Canadian provinces.
Ooh, I like this.
Yes, I thought you'd like that, Paul. So, right, first one. And there's only 5. So, first one, Manitoba.
Farmers.
Ontario.
Home.
Prince Edward Island.
Potatoes.
British Columbia.
Careful here.
Rocky Mountains.
What is it?
Rocky Mountains.
Okay.
Huh, okay. Quebec.
French.
There it is. Five. I mean, and you didn't get yourself in trouble. I mean,
I was going to say safe answers there.
That was a minefield.
It's sort of how I feel. Like I guess I could have said, oil for Manitoba, but
Paul, if we'd done the United States version of that, there were certain states that I could have lobbed out to Paul. And he would have made some very
trigger states. I'll just start cussing. You know what I mean?
Right. He would have made some very so that was a challenge.
Don't even bring up Wyoming. I can't handle it.
I would.
I'm done, Chris.
And I would like a little bit of credit for pronouncing it. See you, Paul.
Done.
Anyway, Matt, you've been a great guest. Thank you very much. And this has probably been our longest episode so far because you added so much value. So we appreciate it. Appreciate your time today. He's coming back in, but he doesn't want to miss the sign off. So Paul, I was just thanking Matt. Probably our longest episode this will end up being, but that's because I mean, we could easily go
talk a lot.
You have great. We had 2 huge areas that you covered extremely well.
Yeah.
Both, giving back and being part of organizations, and talking about
data.
Privacy and can it go too far? I think either one of those could have been a whole episode, and we're gonna probably have to have you back if we end up doing additional seasons, Paul. I think Matt goes. I think, hey, producer David, I know you're listening. Matt goes on the invite back list.
Yeah, definitely.
And but we thank you very much for your time today. It was a great show. Paul, you want to walk us out?
Yeah, thanks for watching. Email Geeks at Home Drinking Coffee. As always, like and subscribe what you're seeing. Tell your friends about it. We're sort of in that stage right now of saying what are we going to do next, because we're finishing up season 1 and excited about what's to come. We're excited about that vanity URL.
Yes.
And so with all that, feel free to email us anytime at emailgeekscoffee@gmail.com.
And otherwise,
thanks for having me, guys.
Thank you, Matt. We'll see you all next week.